Hey everybody. So, as you can tell by the sound of my voice and by most of the content on my channel, I'm a pretty big nerd, and one of the things that'll hammer this home is the fact that I've been into warships since I was a little kid. And like most people who are into warships, one of the coolest things to think about is how the biggest and baddest ships would fare in that fictional one versus one kind of boxing match scenario. So today I want to make a video and use my 1/700 scale models as a visual point to share a few thoughts of mine on how these fights would go. Now, before I begin, I need to make it clear that I am not an expert in this field. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in this field. I just am an enthusiast and just want to post up a video to share my thoughts on how I think all these fights will go down. Now, to be clear, I'm going to be calling these ships by their actual name. So this is going to be the Amato, this is going to be the Missouri, and this is going to be the Tirpitz. I'm going to put these guns up, that's driving me crazy. So, here we go. Alright, so before I begin, I'm going to take the Amato aside. I'm going to take the Missouri aside. And I'm even going to take the Tirpitz aside for a second. And I'm going to bring out the Bismarck and the Hood. And I know this seems a little crazy, but I'm doing this to provide context for my comments. So the Bismarck and the Hood is probably one of the most famous sea battles of World War II, and maybe even of all time. And the Hood was famous for, of course, being sunk fairly quickly by the larger, more modern Bismarck. But the reason why I'm actually bringing this up is because when most people make these one versus one type comparisons, usually it's based off of specifications and things of that sort. And specifications can sometimes not represent how things go in real life. For example, the Bismarck and the Hood. The Bismarck was unquestionably the bigger, better warship. I think most people at the time, before this fight happened, if they were to predict how a fight between these two would go down, I think most bets would smartly be on the Bismarck to win. Whether it's to score a mission kill against the Hood and render her unusable, or to actually go so far as to sink her. I think most people would agree the Bismarck would be able to do that. But I think most people would also project that the Hood would be able to inflict some pretty serious damage on the Bismarck first. Because at the end of the day, both of these ships are very similar in weight. Both of these ships have 15-inch guns. Granted, the guns in the Bismarck are a lot more modern. But nonetheless, the Hood definitely has what it takes. Did I keep saying Hood? Anyways, the Hood definitely has what it takes to inflict quite a bit of damage on the Bismarck. And I think most people would agree that when the Hood goes down, she won't go down without a fight, and that's not at all how it happened. Instead, the Hood was sunk like 5 minutes after opening fire against the Bismarck. I mean, it was over that quick. And by sunk, I mean, I don't mean just damage. We're talking about blown up, done. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. For all the specifications, for all this, that, and the other, I think it would have been tough for anybody to see it happening that quickly. But that's exactly what happens. Now, of course, people will be like, well, you know, the Hood had weak deck armor, and some people would have seen that coming. Sure, cool. So did the Bismarck. I mean, it was a little bit stronger, but not much. But nonetheless, that's going to be the context here, is that it's going to be really tough to predict how these scenarios will go down, because real life kind of has a way of changing things up a bit. So let's take those away. And I realize I've already talked quite a bit, so I'm going to try to condense my thoughts down to keep this a more palatable video. So here we're going to bring out the Tirpitz, the Missouri, and the Amato, which, by the way, all three of these ships were actually afloat and in service at the same time, so this is a very, very fair comparison. So with that said, Tirpitz, Missouri, Yamato, in a one versus one scenario, who would be the best? And I don't think that's a very easy question to answer, but I'm going to start by eliminating the Tirpitz. Now, the Tirpitz is a big ship. It's nearly as heavy as the Missouri, and it is a modern-ish vessel, It had great guns. I mean, even though it was completely outclassed by the Missouri and Yamato in terms of armament, its 15-inch guns were still pretty respectable. And its armor was designed to obviously get into a slug fight, kind of in the North Atlantic waters, where visibility is not often that great. So this is designed to get up close and personal and to just slug it out, kind of old school style. And really and truly, though, I think the only chance the Tirpitz would have against either of these two ships is to somehow close the gap, and if it cannot get hit, let alone critically injured in that process, it might have a chance, might ever have a ever so slight chance against something like, say, the Missouri in a knife fight. But even then, I just don't see it happening. The Missouri is better armored. It has way better firepower behind it. I'd also go so far as to say that the Missouri will probably land more hits on the Tirpitz than the Tirpitz could land on the Missouri, let alone that both of these ships are going to be able to fire at a range to where plunging fires are going to become a very serious threat to the Tirpitz. So unless this were done in the North Atlantic, Tirpitz is pretty much the one with the most disadvantages here. Now, I don't know if either of these ships would be able to literally blow up or sink the Tirpitz, but I do think a mission kill is definitely very likely. So as much as I like the Tirpitz, I'm going to take her out of the equation, because the only scenario I see her possibly coming out with a win is to close the gap and to make it a knife fight. And she's got to survive that journey. That would be tough. Not impossible, though. So this leaves the Missouri and the Yamato. And there's so much that can be said on this, and I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. Ultimately, the advantage goes to the Yamato. It's the biggest, baddest battleship ever made. I mean, it was designed for this kind of fictional thought, this battleship on battleship fight. The Missouri wasn't. And that's not to say the Missouri is a weak ship. It's, by any means, is a very, very powerful ship, but the Yamato was designed for exactly what we're talking about. It has ridiculously thick armor. It's 71,000 tons versus the Missouri, which I believe was around 52,000 tons fully loaded. So there's a huge difference in weight there. We have 18-inch guns versus 16-inch. Now, granted, the 16-inch guns in the Missouri were no slouch. Between the shell quality, the muzzle velocity, all that good stuff is very close in kinetic power to the Yamato's 18-inch guns. But still, the Yamato had heavier guns. The Yamato had better protection. And here's going to be the big, big thing. The Missouri was not designed to withstand this kind of firepower. It just wasn't. It's not to say it couldn't. It's just, if the Yamato happened to score a nice broadside or even a few really good hits with this 18-inch shells, the Missouri's in trouble. So ultimately, though, what gives the Missouri the advantage besides speed is the fact that it does have good radar control behind it, and the accuracy of the guns. I'm not going to overinflate this and say, oh my god, the Americans, accuracy was ridiculous, because Japanese with their optical system wasn't too bad. But I do think ultimately the Missouri has the best chance of making first contact between the ships. And I think that is going to heavily, heavily influence who would win. I think that's really ultimately what it will boil down to. Who's the one who can gain the first critical hits with their main guns? And I think the Missouri stands the best chance of that happening. With that being said, obviously in the real world, it's impossible to predict how things would go, but I think it is safe to say that if the Missouri gets an accurate firing solution and can nail a few good hits into the Yamato's day would pretty much be ruined. I don't think the Missouri could out and out sink the Yamato, but I do think it would be a mission kill. With that being said, if the Yamato is the one who scores the first firing solution, and if she can land a few good hits in the Missouri, I think the Missouri's day is done. Again, I'm not sure if the Yamato can out and out sink the Missouri, but I think a few really good shots from the Missouri or from the Yamato would definitely pretty much render the fight completely over at that point. So, all right, so Ultimately, I think it's a 50-50 chance. I think the advantage definitely does go to the Yamato just because it's just such a big, powerful ship. I think the Missouri is more under pressure to get things done than the Yamato would be. But either way you look at it, it's kind of cool that this is all in fiction, because these battles that we're talking about between either the Yamato or the Missouri or the Tirpitz, it would be a hugely bloody, nasty battle. So it's kind of cool that we can only just sit here and talk about it. With that said, guys, that's my take on everything. And if you have any comments, if you agree, if you disagree, by all means, let me know. With that said, I look forward to posting up some more videos soon. Thanks. Bye.